I'm Nicole Matthews with the Kidcast County Health Network. I know I met some or many of you, some for the first time. So we have funding through the Department of Commerce, the State Department of Commerce, to do Childcare Partnership Grant, which focuses on the expansion of quality early learning in our community because we are seen as a desert area, not having enough licensed childcare slots in our county. So a couple years ago, 2 years ago, we did the childcare needs assessment, and from that, we made a strategic plan, and a key area out of the 4 areas was workforce attachment or employer supported care, on being able to provide more support to employers, because a lot of employers have noticed we're having trouble with recruitment and retention because there's a holdup with childcare. We don't have enough slots. Families can't put their kids in childcare. It's hard to get people to move here when they have nowhere to take their kids. So with that being said, a big focus on right now working on is getting that support for employers and figuring out a way to provide models or like what's working in other areas. And so I've been nicely introduced to Paige with the State Department of Commerce when they're doing a technical assistance program for employer supported care. This has become a very important issue to me. Jerry can attest to it. Jerry's HR director at Hope Source. And I remember I'm being out here pregnant with second kid. And at the same time, which our HR director loves, is we had 4 or 5 people also out here at the same time. and Jerry's done a really great job, and I'll let you speak to all the things that you've done. But like figure out a way to support employees, but that way it's equitable and fair to everybody, not just pregnant women or families, but how can you make it equitable and deal with all that. So I remember her having folks out. I remember Andrea out there with the measuring tape and her husband trying to figure out how they would build a licensed childcare facility off the building, or looking at different benefits packages and things like that. And so really what we're looking at is like how we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but tailoring things to the needs of each business and each community, because Ellensburg is totally different than Clay Elm or Kittitas, and every business is totally different on what they can and cannot do. I very fortunately was able to bring both my children, probably selfishly from Jerry, because she likes to hold and cuddle babies, but it was a wonderful environment to have. But the Department of Health had their infant care at work policy, which we were able to look at. And so I think like the 3rd month, I was able to kind of slowly come in and start bringing my children, very small children. And so we were able to hold the babies, got a little baby time, and it was a great benefit to obviously the employee. With that being said, I got Paige and a number of consultants who let's do. Right? Okay. And I'll let you do I'll let you do the introductions, but Paige is here, and hopefully this is not the last time we see her or the team, and we'll pull them in every single week or every day if we need to.
Thank you so much.
When do we do the dance?
I am a horrible dancer. That just made my blood pressure. I have a feeling I have some allies in the room around that fear. I'm glad you talked about the Infant at Work program, because it really is morale building. There's something about bringing kids. Some businesses bring puppies. There's just something that really changes the kind of the ether in the room or in the office, where we can actually bring some of our family or extended family if they're 4-legged. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for the introduction. We're really happy to be here today. It's beautiful out here. I live in Pacific County, so it's very, very different. I'm more of the sea level person, so driving through the mountains was just such a treat. So thank you for the opportunity to just come and visit your community and share with you a little bit of the work that we're doing. As Nicole was describing, there's been this kind of groundswell of interest around early learning resources and facilities, and recognizing that there's a real gap between the demand and how many families need childcare, and then how many providers have childcare spaces. Some people call them slots. I hesitate on that because they're kids and there's seats. So what we wanted to do today is share with you a little bit about kind of how this part of the thinking came into the mix for looking at what roles could employers play in this childcare space and the need. And there's some obvious needs that employers are trying to meet and challenges that they have, and we're just starting to connect the dots. And I would say just starting, and that's since 2018. So there's been years of work and research on this. We have probably about a 25, 30-minute presentation. Because you are such a great group, we're going to be open to questions as we're going through this. So we'd love for it to be interactive. If you've got a question that gets sparked, it may be that other people in the room have the same question. So just feel free to let us know that you'd like us to pause. Fair enough. I am visiting you all from Pacific County, as I mentioned, and I have two folks joining me. Ben Robinson, who's with First Rule Group, which is a professional business consulting firm. He's the finance, I'm going to say wizard. He is brilliant, and I'm just so glad that you also made the trip over here. And then Sue Ing Moody is here as part of our shared team in commerce. She's the regional engagement specialist for your area. And maybe towards the end or during a break, she can speak a little bit about her work. She also happens to be a mayor of a local town.
Cool.
I think it's twist, right? Okay, well, let's go ahead and move through these slides. I think we have about 20. This slide, I think, is just a nice image to capture the range at which Commerce has different programs. There are probably about 100 or so programs that are underneath Commerce as a state agency. As you can see, they range so broadly. It's not just economic development, it's about community as well. And that's where we landed on we strengthen communities. So I think for our purposes, it's interesting to highlight that we're focused on all of this, as well as business recruitment, retention, workforce innovation, industry supports, housing, energy, and broadband. And I think a lot of that can spark interest, especially for rural communities. I live in Pacific County, as I mentioned. It's pretty darn rural as well. So I appreciate the mix that you have in your community. As we mentioned, this conversation has been going on since about 2018. Commerce staffed and facilitated a diverse stakeholder group called the Childcare Collaborative Task Force. And over the years, they researched and reviewed a number of different data and studies to be able to come up with annual recommendations for the state legislature, as well as for the rest of our communities to take a look at. One of those reports in 2021, called the Childcare Market Access Strategy Report, included a recommendation for employer-supported childcare technical assistance. That is a long term that basically means what we've come to understand is employer or family-friendly workplaces is kind of a short way to say it. But I also wanted to highlight that the task force in their research began to understand that more than half of the children in Washington live in an area with an inadequate supply of childcare services. And so that's just meaning that there are not enough seats of childcare centers or early learning facilities. And similarly, this is really more of the interest perhaps to employers, is that almost 50% of parents in Washington state say that childcare is a barrier to them returning to work. So when we hear in the news that there are so many employers that have vacancies for their workforce, we start to connect the dots that actually there may be some very qualified, skilled people who are at home who would like to return to work, but they have some barriers. And one of those is the need for a childcare center or spot for their child. I think this last point is interesting to highlight, and that is that so many people have children or elders at home where they have some responsibilities for their care. And so right now we understand that it's about 50% people have somebody that they're caring for in addition to full-time work. So you can imagine those pressures, and perhaps that resonates with you personally. So we have this opportunity to really connect those dots, as I mentioned, on what is employer-supported childcare and how does that really translate into what's family-friendly. what are policies and practices that employers currently have? And many employers, I believe, have some family-friendly policies and practices, and they just haven't been spotlighted in that way. So as you look across this continuum of options that an employer may consider, the low-cost investment, I would say, is information referral. They might connect with a local childcare provider, a family center, and also connect their employees to subsidies if they qualify. And then across the board, it gets a little bit more time intensive and financial investment heavy for on-site childcare centers. So usually it's the maybe medium or larger sized businesses who will consider that, but they go through their own feasibility study, and sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. So what they do is they snap back to look at what are my other options. And so part of our work is to illuminate what are those options that an employer may consider, and what process might they go through to understand what do their own employees need or want even. There are lots of studies that are both national and international that underscore that the benefits of employer-supported childcare or family-friendly workplaces really meet the challenges of employers. You can see across the slide as you scan the benefits, but what that does is it meets the employers where they are with the pains that they see, where they are not able to find people to be able to fill the job openings that they have. And they may lose people because they have childcare needs that aren't being met and they need to go help at home. Also, the employer may have productivity issues. And so there's a sense that if an employer has a value of supporting the whole person, including what's happening at home, that they may have an increased loyalty. And this is actually demonstrated across the board. So there's greater productivity for the employer in their production line or in their customer service. All of this translates down into boosting the profits and the productivity for the employer. And we have lots of research and studies to be able to help employers understand this business case. We'll spare you a lot of that information for now. As I mentioned, we are starting to really understand that employer-supported childcare translates into this perspective of family-friendly workplaces. And there may be some opportunities to further develop that as not only a campaign, but also an understanding where employers may already have an approach to not fire somebody if they have to leave work early on a consistent basis to pick up their child, but perhaps they look to adjusting their shifts so that they can leave in time to be able to pick up the child from the provider or the childcare center. So Commerce is leading this project. We're in the pilot phase of it, and we are smart enough to contract people who complement our work, and that is Kesh Marketing. And unfortunately, they both are moms of young families and have the spring sickness, so they're not able to be here today. But and we're supportive of them taking care of what they need to. And then First Rule Group are helping us with identifying those solutions, strategies, and developing tools, which I think you might get a window into as we move forward. So what we are offering right now are individual and group consultations for employers, but we're also working with business networks and communities to be able to help the process of thinking through what solutions are out there and how to be able to meet employers where they are, but also your workforce, and to be able to close that gap of understanding for those employers and employees that may not be having that conversation. When I had a chance to interview a manufacturing company and some of their employees, it was interesting that they said that there was no way that they would actually talk with their HR person about their needs for childcare. They wouldn't approach their employer for other resources, or even do they know a childcare provider nearby, since they don't live in that particular community. So I think that just leaving the door open. Human resource professionals and employers can start to see that they could be maybe more approachable for working parents who are part of the workforce. We're not charging any cost to do the consultation. I think that that's really valuable to mention. So to be able to have access to an HR professional, a finance person, and a childcare expert to be able to help noodle through what are some of the possibilities for the different employers. We will be developing more webinars. We can, as this, come in and give a presentation about where we're at in the development of this program and help identify different opportunities for partnering. We are developing interactive tools right now to be able to help with determining the feasibility of different solutions. For us, we understand that for an employer, they want to understand how does it make sense for their business? And so we're developing tools that will help identify and understand the return on investment. And at what point do you start with the first part of the continuum and grow to the final set, if possible? We'll be offering different templates and sample surveys and agreements. And what's brewing is this idea of how to help with an individual employer develop a marketing campaign, even if it's just internal to their own employees, to understand that, yes, they are supportive of working parents and there are different ways that they could be a resource, even if it's the information referral. Kind of ran through that pretty quickly. I wanted to know if there are any questions before we move to the next section. Okay. Well, yes, Nicole.
Okay, I'm doing this thing. Okay. So yes, there's tools and things coming along the way. If employers want services now, would they just contact you directly and just? Okay.
Yes, I can hand out my business card. At the moment, we will have a web page. Actually, there is a program web page where an employer or a business network could fill that out, and that will come to me, and I can distribute that to the different resources that we have. Or people can call me, they can email me, and we will be setting up more of online tools so that if it's 10 o'clock at night and somebody's interested in seeing, well, what would this look like? It may be a little bit better, I hope, than say a mortgage calculator to give some suggestions of what you can do. I know we've all done it, or some of us have. Where would that put us in? But Ben can speak to this a little bit more. The tools will help give perhaps 2 or 3 different solutions that an employer may want to consider and open up that box. I think we covered this a little bit. The childcare strategic plan that Nicole referenced before is so thorough and inspirational. We're happy to be a resource to help continue the work that you're doing in your community. We absolutely know that community and businesses benefit from childcare in so many ways, as well as all the families. And I like to think that childcare is not only supportive of the current workforce, but it's also helping the children, since they'll be part of our leaders and our workforce in the future. And absolutely, for the employers in the room, as well as the business networks, we think that you're doing a lot. And so we'd like to raise more awareness about what is in a family-friendly workplace, what policies and practices may you already be doing, and to get some feedback on if you think it would be helpful to communicate that out to your current employees or maybe your future ones. Kind of imagine a job posting that might say, "We are a family-friendly workplace." And the the continuum of solutions, I think, helps to illuminate that not all solutions are for everybody. And so there are different bundles that a business could put together. And just we want to recognize that one size does not fit all. I am going to turn this over to Mr. Ben Robinson to speak a little bit more about their work in developing the content and digging a little bit deeper into each of the solutions.
Yeah, we'll see how time goes and what questions are.
Okay.
So we can definitely be flexible.
Thank you.
Any questions? So it's going to be a little more specific now. Any questions from what you were asking about sort of the higher level?
How long will the Department of Commerce be willing to carry or be able to support the technical assistance program? Could be one of those things, just like the Childcare Partnership Grant, is like we're gonna pick up momentum. But like that sounds great, and you're gonna get more interest, and I would kind of suck to see it. Like, oh, no more money.
Yep. I can speak to that. I've been assured that we are all going to be able to continue this work into the future. It's multiple years of funding, and I don't see a final year. If I ever hear that, I will call you and say, we have 2 more years. That may be possible. It is beautiful out here. Yes, we are committed, and Commerce is committed to continuing this work. And that's the inspiration of the work that you all have done in your community, and also the Child Care Collaborative Task Force. So yeah, great question.
And again, please feel free to ask questions. We want this to be dynamic. I think we might have dropped a slide. So I'm from the First Real Group. There are 2 others of us. They are not here today. Daisy and Susan. So I'm the finance side of TA. Susan's the HR side, and Daisy is sort of the generalist and project manager. Susan has 25 years of experience in HR in various organizations. I have 15 years experience in financial management and leadership in various small and medium-sized businesses. Paige actually comes out of the state and has quite a bit of experience at the state level trying to do some of these community-based approaches. So fairly deep expertise. And as you can see on this slide, this is my segue. We don't know everything. Driving over here, I live on the west side. We want to learn from everybody here how it works in your community. So we're here to help, but we don't have all the answers. I mean, we can put some structures around it and be an extra pair of hands or a thought partner, but really want to engage as much as we can the experts who are already here. And this slide here was an example of that. I just pulled some of the state data, and there's definitely more childcare spots when you look at sort of the state data. So the earlier work that you all have done definitely it is apparent, it shows, and it's still only about 10% of the need is met. So in my mind, that highlights there isn't one magic solution coming. It's not if the city did something, if the county did something, if the state did something, we will get there. Everybody kind of has to chip in. And that's kind of where we are on the employer side. We're very focused on supporting employers, not because they're the only players, but that's the angle we're coming at. Clearly involves everyone. And then as you get to the business side, for the unemployment side, as we were talking about, a lot of this is about engaging the workforce, get more employees to fill the slots that we need. And the number of businesses seem to be steady. Unemployment is increasing. And you can see in this top upper right-hand chart, the blue line is supply. It's what the state refers to as like the UI claims, unemployment insurance. So people are coming off of unemployment insurance, but the number of jobs is staying flat. But when you look at like the next level down, it seems like a lot of that is seasonal employees. So something is definitely different, but it doesn't mean at the state level that all of the positions you have can be filled. It means it's complicated, and when you add it all up on an average, it might be misleading. So that's where, sort of just as a segue into the conversation, we can see this stuff, but this doesn't feel like it's really what you all are experiencing. So I'll pause here. I mean, for all of you, does this match what you're seeing? Is that a lot of childcare isn't met, and that the hiring market is changing, but not great?
What on low demand? What do you mean by that?
Well, the low supply. So again, this is from the state. The state
Right.
publishes this. They bring in a third party who does surveys of job postings. So that's what they're looking at as demand.
So they're not advertising for that, yeah.
Well, exactly. So part of it is not every position is advertised, particularly in smaller communities. You might not be using Indeed as much as
Right,
others.
and agricultural people doesn't.
Absolutely.
Might be word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that's where on the demand side, it looks like in January, there's low demand for agricultural workers, but that seems like that would just make sense.
Right.
It just isn't it? Yeah. Yep,
No.
exactly. So that's where at a high level, I'm able to see this, but it's only part of the story and it can be really misleading. Any other comments just about this? Is this kind of what everybody is experiencing? Okay. So diving into sort of the ROI of childcare, I think most people here probably already have a grasp of this. I mean, it really boils down to recruitment and retention. It's hard to fill positions. It's hard to run a business. Trying to hire somebody while you're backfilling that position is just really hard. So anything that we're able to do to help people stay longer or have the positions open a shorter period of time is helpful. The downside is it's hard. It isn't like buying a new truck or building a new building. The ROI isn't that concrete, but it's still real. And this slide goes through a little bit of sort of specifics. I'd highlight kind of at the bottom here. One thing we try to emphasize is that anyone with children now is doing something. So as an employer, if you can just make that better, it's valuable. So if you can go and build childcare, that's great. But as a parent trying to get back into the workforce, anything can be helpful. And some of these things really don't take big investments. So that's kind of a theme you'll see as we go through it. Questions about this that ring true for people? The other theme that kind of goes through it is, and I'll speak from my own experience of sort of on the finance side, tend to view everything as assets and they're just people, you know, they're numbers on payroll, but they exist in a household and they have all kinds of other things going on. And to the extent an employer can cater to some of those or make some of those easier, it's just easier to be an employee there and it makes you want to stay longer. So that's kind of the theme here as well. And again, a graphic to highlight that, you know, particularly if you're a larger employer, you might see a ton of resumes. It just kind of flows in. It's easy to depersonalize them. All of those people exist in some kind of context. Something else is happening. And again, it's to the extent possible based on the employer's vision, values, things they think are important. Acknowledging this is true can be really valuable. And then taking what steps you can be incredibly important.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So some of the feedback that we've been getting in this early stage of developing the program and just how we're engaging in the conversations is that we get feedback that there are many people who have elders at home or dependents who have different health conditions, maybe not the littles. And so I think we have an opportunity to learn from developing and responding to the childcare needs of different communities, as well as keeping in mind that this may be applicable to expand to elder care, dependent care of different kinds. So I just wanted to add that, and you'll note that we included some people with canes and I think there might be a wheelchair on there. So there's some opportunities to learn from what we're crafting in partnership with employers and communities and be ready for the what's next. So as you're hearing childcare, that's definitely the focus. And we have some of those opportunities to expand and be ready for policies and practices that probably will apply for dependent care of all ages and abilities. So I just wanted to plant that seed. Thanks.
And that might be a theme. I might get to the theme at some point.
Yes.
But along those lines, one of the strategies is just making more broadly available something you might already be doing. Or conversely, make it apparent where it applies. So we know a lot of employers say, if you need time off, take it. But somebody who's a parent might think, well, they don't really need it for this. I have a meeting at 4. So it's already there. It just wasn't clear that they could partake of it for this reason. So again, childcare That's the program we're here for, but lots of these things aren't specifically for parents. So sort of segueing, that's sort of the general framework we're using to get to the nuts and bolts is like, it will require investment. This isn't going to happen on its own. It is usually money and time, and usually the time part is the hardest part. Not many of these are very expensive, but it's time. I mean, it can take a lot of time, and it can take time when employers have the least of it, intense moments. You might make a decision that actually is against your policies, but you just didn't have the time to fully think it through. And so that's the area that we focus a lot of this on, is sort of the culture, the time, the structures into which you're making the investments. Questions about this, and we'll go through sort of the specifics of this. And we do have later from Hope Source. I only spoke on the phone. I don't know where Jerry. So she's done a lot of this stuff, here in the community. She'll be here for the roundtable to go into the specifics of how you've actually done it and experienced it. So here's some of the general points and then specifics later. So again, these employer strategies, this is just kind of expanding what Paige walked through earlier. So again, from an employer perspective, we're trying to make it broken down into things that you can actually start doing. And, as soon as you are able, each one of these will have templates, things you could fill in, ways you can go about sort of assessing, am I already doing it? And I just need to explain it better. Could I start doing it? What would I need to start? And we'll go through just kind of each bucket, not in detail. So the information referral piece, I point to the third one here as the most important, is the workplace culture piece. And the example that we've kind of used is, if you paid somebody by crumpling up dollar bills and throwing it at them, they still get paid, but they're going to experience their paycheck very differently. So similar to this, like, yes, we have time off, but no, that 4 p.m. meeting is really critical. So that time off doesn't apply there. Can make a really big difference. So that's this piece. And again, that's not expensive from a cash perspective, but it can be hard in the moment trying to figure out, the only open slot I have is 4 all week long. That can be really hard. The next one is flexible shifts. And this can take immense forms. All of them can be really easy or really hard. Most employers don't have to get very big for it to not apply to everybody. And then you have to be prepared for those questions of, why does the person with the child get to leave now, but I have to stay? That's hard. So we will have materials on all of these, talking through all of these components. Our experience is most people are already doing some version of this, if not all of it. Financial contributions, in some sense, this is easy. This is just give people more money so it doesn't cost as much. But then the question is, how do you do it? Do I just bump up everybody's wages? Do I ask for receipts from the childcare facility and then pay it as part of their expense reimbursement? Do I set up a spending account? Those take different forms depending on sort of who you are and how you want to dive into it. So that's sort of this section. Employee benefits. It's a gray line between the financial contributions and employee benefits. But this is just going through, how would we expand the time off? Are we going to pay for it when people leave? Are we not? Are we eliminating a payout because we used to pay for vacation and now we're not? All of those considerations kind of flow through here. An example we've seen recently is, several large firms going to unlimited time off, which that seems great. The data shows people actually take less time off when it's unlimited, and it usually blows up everybody's payout when they leave, and they were viewing that as their severance package. So that's an example of, seems great, but it's not quite as easy to implement as you might hope. And the last one is just childcare, various options of, if it's available, how do we actually facilitate access to it? And the one thing here for the on-site childcare to highlight here, frequently what we've seen is when people build it, the staff presume it's free. And it usually turns out to be more expensive than that which is already in the community. So this usually ties pretty closely to financial contributions. These aren't mutually exclusive. They very often go together. So that's the range. Again, not going to walk through all of them, but the hope is there's something here people are already doing. There's some things that are pretty easy to do. And as we talked about from the beginning, you'll likely be doing this for years to come. I mean, it isn't a one-time thing. So start to dive into it, get a sense of how it works, and then build on it. And the last slide here just kind of highlights lots of employers are already doing great things. They might not have tied it together, and their staff might not perceive it that way. So part of this too is just trying to figure out where the employer is right now, because they might not be getting the credit or the return for all the work that they've done. And I think this is sort of the final slide of examples of sort of how to go through it, but also we've already helped some employers doing all of these. That first step is just figuring out what do staff need, both current staff and future staff. And again, practical reality of you can't ask people, do you have kids? Are you going to have? So even that isn't as straightforward as you might hope. And then just sort of step through this life cycle. And ideally, we're able to help in any parts of this. But again, you all know your communities better than we do, so we can help, but can't know until we fully engage with it. I think that was it. Is that the last?
That is. Yeah.
Questions about any of this?
Questions, thoughts, feedback, what resonates with you?
Okay, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, it's so helpful. It can be difficult to figure out what should I do as you jump. Myriad of options. How do you know which one to take? How do you know which one's going to be most valuable to your employees? What my people need might be different than, the place next door. So it's very helpful to kind of have a resource for that. And I love the idea specifically. I mean, I do think we're doing a number of things, but it's that marketing piece. How do I talk about what we're doing in a way that's attractive for recruitment and so that my staff know that it's available to them? It's so hard to especially as you have new people coming in, how do you make sure they know it exists and it's available to them? And to your point, you said, sometimes you can have time off, but people assume it doesn't mean for them. And we just recently had that where, even though our policy explicitly states you can use your sick leave for mental health, whatever, people are like, I feel like I can take a mental health day. I'm like, no, but you can. So it's that marketing piece that I find really useful. So I'm excited about what you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. And that's actually part of what she was referring to earlier about sort of some kind of way of communicating, not necessarily a certification, but some kind of thing that employees could see and know, that means these 4 things are true. Yeah.
Okay, I am going to say that I'm going to stop talking about Australia. We've been very inspired by a program that Australia has nationwide. It's actually called Family Friendly Workplaces, and we are talking with them to learn about what are they doing with their benchmarking, and they actually provide a certification of employers as family friendly workplaces. So we may not go that whole range. We might, I don't know. We're actually doing a feasibility study to see, would that be useful? So you may get some questionnaires about that. But I think to your point, Jerry, to start naming it and giving it identity around being family friendly, I don't think that that's going to be a trend. I think it's going to start to become an awareness that we have of how to take care of the whole person, not just have a warm body to fill whatever job it is. So I think that we're at the cusp of really starting to see how can we make a difference to be able to support people where they are. And it's going to have, I think, a good business outcome as well. Other comments, questions? Oh, Nicole. Please.
Exactly what Jerry says is very helpful because you start going through the motions. We were talking about this about just everything in general, where you're trying to go through it and then you just hit a roadblock. You're like, that's just too much going on. And just like running a licensed childcare facility, HRs are doing their own thing every single day, putting out the fires, trying to get through the things. It's like you want to do that, but how do I start? How do I implement it? How do I keep it going? So I echo exactly what she says. My question is, there's obvious low-hanging fruit when it comes to employer outreach. It's like, you can reach out to and connect and provide technical assistance probably a little bit easier when you have folks that are doing office jobs or have those remote options or things like that, or have larger funding sources. So have you tried, or if any, maybe you have not, but if you receive pushback on other type of positions on how to provide assistance. So like my position is much more flexible, being able to take my daughter, my children to the doctor's appointments, stay on sick days. My husband climbs power lines for a living. Like there's no way he can like strap Tori up to his chest and be like, let's go. Right? So it's like, how are we getting union buy-in? Are we getting, that type of workforce in, as far as, because I know there was also a House bill recently that was going through on supporting with subsidy for those who are going through apprenticeship programs, or being pipe fitters, plumbers, linemen, things like that. So what other supports are, or they're like, no, we ain't doing that. I know, I'm just kind of rambling, that's what I do, but,
So I think what I'm
has been the
hearing you
feedback?
say is that there may be easier solutions for those who work in an office environment, who can
Right.
work remote, either in the office or at home, to take care of what they need to take care of and take a quick 15-minute break or whatever might be needed.
Or just the culture is totally different.
And the culture may be different. Absolutely. We are working with Impact Washington, who is kind of the key organization working with manufacturers throughout the state of Washington. And so you can imagine, similar to the person who's working on the electrical lines, people have to be working at the machineries on the shop floor. You can't just kind of go home or work remote. So we're working with them to see what would make sense on their end. Certainly that environment is not set up for children to come to work. But perhaps for them, there might be some opportunities to partner with a local childcare provider, or support a community resource that could expand an existing facility or create a new one. So I think that there's different ways that employers can participate in that. It may not be that end of the continuum of the on-site childcare, but I think to be involved in the community and conversations about the resources available for the families and their children is really important. So I don't think that it's limited to just the remote workers and that workforce. I think that it has some relevancy for every kind of employer.
Well, I would just add on that.
Please.
I mean, there's a few examples of like manufacturers going to 410s. So that's an example of, it's not perfect, but that's an extra day you don't have to find childcare. It's an extra day you can plan ahead. You're able to sort of target all the doctor's appointments on that day off.
Right, but on the flip side of that, you have two-parent working household, my husband works 410s, and he's not available. Like I'm a predominantly like the caretaker, like the go-to. The majority of the days we can work overtime. Sometimes there's 70-hour, 80-hour weeks, and so I was wondering if there was some part of it in the strategic plan to like go to unions and go to their local union meetings to have say, hey, like this is probably a benefit you should ask for when you go up again to negotiate contracts. You might want to consider putting this in that package, and then maybe your significant other or your single parent would be much more helpful.
Nicole, do you think there's a barrier in that at all, that does seem to be sort of male-dominated
Yeah,
industry,
absolutely.
right? And so they aren't necessarily asking for that, because culturally, we're not saying
Right.
that they need to be the ones to be available. There's a default that the wives are gonna be the ones that are available. So, yeah, I think that's a great idea, suggesting it to them, saying, like,
Hey, like
You
you
have
have
that
maybe so you can come to work and you're still want to go to work
Yeah.
40 hours a week.
Yeah.
I'm speaking from personal perspective, but yes, there's a cultural difference. There is, you will get a lot more pushback, at least the experience that we've had is like, if you have to take time off for the doctor's appointment with the kids up early, it's like I'll do it, but there's hesitation.
because legally I might have to, but I'm gonna punish you for it, essentially.
Right, or we're gonna put 28 off the
Yeah.
power line that you left early.
Yeah.
But yes, there's.
So Nicole's comment that led to talking about the manufacturing industry was not planted. We didn't plan that.
Was that a good time?
It was really good timing. One of my favorite employers in the manufacturing space is American Paper Converting. And she speaks for about 3 minutes about her perspective on the workforce and childcare for her business. So if you don't mind, I'd really like to share this video with you, and then we can take any final questions and wrap up.